Today we're going to be building a custom built-in mudroom bench with storage. The first part of this project was going to be building the cabinet carcass, basically the box that all the drawers were going to live in and slide out of. So that's the lower part of the bench. We needed to construct that basically similar to like a base cabinet that you would find in a kitchen or a bathroom. So we used 3/4 inch plywood and we cut that all down to size. I kind of did a rough sketch on the computer so I knew what sizes I need. And then we cut that all down to size. Then we came back and sanded everything, all of those pieces, or Jamie sanded all of those pieces so that she wouldn't have to worry about getting into those tight corners after it was assembled. With all the pieces cut, it was time to assemble the lower base cabinet, and we did so with pocket hole joinery. We needed to drill all those pocket holes, and with larger pieces of plywood I found that it's just easier to use the Craig R3 pocket hole jig. It's just a small pocket hole jig that you can easily clamp onto any surface, and it just makes the process of handling the material a lot easier. With all the pocket holes drilled, then we came back and assembled the lower or the base cabinet box essentially with 1 1/4 inch pocket hole screws. So with the cabinet carcass, or the box rather, with that all assembled, it was time to assemble the platform. And I did these separately because I wasn't exactly sure how I wanted to do it. I knew I wanted to incorporate some feet in there to make it more like a piece of furniture. However, I wanted that platform to also have a toe kick in it, so it's recessed about 3.5 inches back from the front face of the cabinet carcass. And that toe kick is just going to allow you to be able to walk up to the bench and hang a book bag or a jacket behind it easily without kicking the bottom of the cabinet. Then we installed the platform to the bottom of the cabinet base, or the cabinet carcass rather. And we did so with pocket hole screws as well. But before we could head on over to paint, we needed to fill all of the imperfections as well as the plywood edges with wood filler. And we chose wood filler over just a standard edge banding because we thought that it might be a little bit more durable, and the way that the kids are going to be beating and banging on this thing, I didn't want that edge banding to come off. Now the wood filler that we chose was Plastic Wood X from DAP, and the cool thing about that is it's got the dry time indicator, so it turns from pink to brown as soon as it's dry and ready for sanding. All right, so now that we've got the base all assembled, I'm gonna go ahead and measure for our drawer fronts. Since we're gonna be making our own drawer fronts, it's gonna be a shaker style, and we've got some router bits to throw on the router table to make that process pretty simple. So the drawer boxes we actually got from a woodworking facility that's not too far away from here. They make drawer boxes and they can make them for cheaper than I can and better. So it was nice to be able to hand off that task. However, we did make the drawer fronts. And if you want to learn a lot more about that, I've got a whole nother video that we just released, and we'll link up to that here in this card as well as in the description. With the cabinet base assembled and sanded, it was time for paint. And we chose the color was actually called Cracked Pepper, and the paint is from Behr, but it's not just a standard latex paint. They actually make an enamel paint that is designed specifically for cabinets and trim, and it just gives you a harder surface for a more durable finish. For the top, we wanted to do something special, so we took a trip over to Live Edge Detroit, which is a local reclaimed wood place in Detroit. The cool thing is they take down trees and then they slab them, dry them, and then sell those slabs to the public. Okay, so I'm gonna start off by using a track saw. And if you're not familiar with a track saw, it's essentially a circular saw that rides along a track, and it's gonna give you a nice, clean, straight cut. So this is gonna be the closest thing to a table saw. However, you can position that cut however you want and cut it. You don't have to go off of a fence. This is a brand new track saw that Craig was kind enough to send me for this project, and they're actually our sponsor for this project. However, since this is a brand new track saw, there is a zero clearance piece of plastic on the edge where the blade is. And when I make this first cut, you're gonna see that the saw blade actually cuts through that and makes sure that that is exactly a zero clearance a cut, so that when we line this track up, from then on, we just need to line up that piece of plastic with where we want to make our cut. The reason why we're cutting it down is because we don't have a wide enough planer to be able to plane this entire slab. We need to be able to cut it down to 13 inches or less, which is the maximum capacity of our planer. So we're going to do that with the track saw. Okay, so I've got both of these slabs cut down to about 12.5 inches wide. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pick my front edge, because I want my front edge to be as thick as possible. We've got about 2 inches of slab here, so I'm gonna pick the straightest edge on one of these boards. So the board has some kind of a little bit of cupping and bowing to it. So I'm gonna pick the straightest edge, because that way I don't have to, I have to take out the least amount of material from the front edge. If I have to take out more material from the back pieces, I'm not worried about that, because it's going to be hidden by the counter. Now, the wood that we're using for the top is Siberian elm, and the problem is that it's not a flat surface, so we had to flatten that slab. The process that I chose for this was basically leveling the slab out on a sled, a plywood sled that I then slid through my router. If I had to do this all over again, I would go with what's a router sled. I would build a router sled and then flatten it with a surfacing bit on the router. And if you're looking for a video on that, I know my buddy John Malecki just put out one. It's called a 10-minute router sled, and that'll show you the process of building a router sled. And that's the process that I would go with if I had to flatten another slab out. Okay, so I've got the slabs very close to flat. They're not perfect, and I think a lot of it had to do with the way that I was shimming the board and the plywood and the flex and the length of the board as well. But they're close enough that we can hand sand it out and it'll be just fine. The problem is that when we ran the track saw down, it's very, very close to straight, but it's not as straight as like a joiner would use or would leave it. So what we need to do is leave a perfect edge on both of these slabs so that they join up nicely, so that when we glue them together, there's no gap in between them. And what I'm thinking, this is a test, we'll see if this works, I've clamped both ends and I intentionally left these slabs longer. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut from about 3 to 4 inches in on each end, and I'm gonna line this track saw up perfectly with this joint and then cut straight down it. That way, that cut, even if it has a slight walk in it, that cut should mate up with the other cut perfectly. So then when we unclamp them and put them back together, cut the ends off that we left, it should mate back up just perfectly. So then after we flattened them or got them as close to flat as possible, again, we had 2 pieces that we needed to join up together, and we did so with just some wood glue and biscuit joints. The biscuit joints were there just for alignment to make sure that that slab was as close to even with each other as possible. And then once we got them joined up, we came back with a hand planer and a sander and just flattened everything out, or smoothed out that joint as best we could. Now there was a couple imperfections in the slab. There was a little crack in the slab that we ended up going back with some epoxy. We ended up tinting that epoxy with a black, just an acrylic paint, just a couple of drops of that in the epoxy was what gave it that tint. We laid that epoxy on and then came back and sanded it smooth just so that it would fill that void, because the crack did go all the way through the table. Now, as far as installing this, it was pretty straightforward. We ended up taking I took an oscillating saw from just a Dremel oscillating saw, and we cut the trim back exactly where we needed it to be. And then we slid the box into place. I ended up making a filler strip because on the right-hand side of the bench, we needed that drawer to be able to pull out, and since that bench was gonna be up against a piece of trim, I made an 1.5 inch wide filler strip to be able to bring that bench out from the wall so the drawer would be able to be pulled out. Then we could take and create a template for the top. We used some plywood and measured the angles. We had kind of a quirky little corner that we had to figure out, so we put a template in, or we created a template for that, and then we brought that back to the slab and cut the slab down with that Craig track saw to the exact dimensions that it needed to be. Now the final finish that we wanted for the slab top of that bench was just an oiled finish, something that we could continue to maintain and apply oil over time. And there's something about oil we've been working with it a lot lately, and it brings out the natural beauty of the wood, and something like that slab top, I didn't want to take away from that by using a polyurethane finish. So that oil leaves you that nice matte finish, and it's a great finish. I think it's probably going to be our go-to finish from here on out. Now it was time to secure the base to the wall, so I used some longer wood screws and just simply found the studs that were in the wall and screwed that base into those studs. Then once the top was all cut down and everything was good with that, we came and set that in place and secured it from the inside of the cabinet up into the bottom of the slab. So we got the drawer boxes installed and went ahead and mounted the drawer fronts using some hot glue to locate them temporarily, and then came back from the inside with 1 1/4 inch wood screws to secure them from the inside of the drawer. I want to take a second to thank our sponsor, DAP. We use their products all throughout this project, including like their carpenter's wood glue for just this general construction. We also use the wood filler, the Plastic Wood X, for filling all the plywood edges as well as any joints and cracks. And then we also use their Alex Plus for tying this whole structure into the wall for a nice seamless integrated look. Whether it's woodworking or small projects in and around the home, DAP has more than likely got a product to suit your needs. So make sure you check them out at dap.com. Hold up a second, make sure you check out this video here. YouTube thinks you like it and I do too. If you haven't hit that subscribe button, you can do so right here. And also if you want the written article on this bench, you can get that right here. Until next time, be safe and happy building.